Yeah, it is. So I guess just first of all, can we get more on this the Korean tests? And everyone's talking about the CNMI and they're getting 60,000 tests, and then you guys came out. You read a letter from Dr. Mike Cruz yesterday, kind of throwing water on that South Korean test. But can you just re-impress upon us, because I see that the FDA approval, that's like the big reason why you guys don't want to engage with these tests. So maybe if you could, again, I'll just give you the floor and maybe reiterate that for some people who are saying that, other places are using these tests, and do we really want to hang everything on that FDA approval?
Yeah, and so I think it's one is important to understand that we continually look at all different options, and that so in this crisis here, every option's on the table. So we're evaluating and reevaluating all our different options. And in this case here, in particular, it's I don't know what I'm trying to understand completely the mentality around the CNMI getting these test kits, and if there's envy that's behind it as well. Because in the end, there's I'm happy that they've made a very clear choice about what route they wanted to do, and they pursued that, and that's good, and that serves their their main interest, and their governor made that decision to do that. In the end here, what we have different access to different resources. The TR being here on island does change our access to resources, in fact, in a lot of ways, in a favorable way. And so we're in a completely different situation. And so everyone has to understand that and respect that. I'm of course in a particular an awkward position here, being born and raised on Saipan. Saipan is still considered home. I feel I always call myself a son of the Mariana Islands, and in this position here, I with what's been going on is I've spoken to Dr. John Tudela, who's the chief medical officer for the hospital there, and who's a big part of this, and so he and I are on the same page that that it's an understanding that this is that these tests are not FDA approved, and that their plan is to use it for surveillance, so not necessarily for clinical treatment and diagnosis. And so understanding what the purpose of the tests are as well is a key part, and it's not easy. It's not a straightforward answer, and that it's complex, and how you utilize it is complex, and so that's the key thing we have to understand. Now, the other part here, I want to there's all this talk about this being it's pending FDA approval. It's all this so forth. I need to make it very, very clear that the FDA has all these tests that we're using. Technically, the FDA has not approved a single one. What they give out is an EUA, or emergency use authorization. So it's an authorization to go ahead and use it. It still needs to go through its proper channels, over time, in terms of reporting data, and in an effort to gain official FDA approval. And so with the test even that we're using here on Guam, like the Abbott ID Now, that's under an emergency use authorization, an EUA. To say it's FDA approved completely is not fully representing what the status of that test actually is. But the closest thing we got to, and it's the highest level that the country is using to the bar that the country is using to use tests. Now, does this mean the South Korean tests are not good? And absolutely not. It doesn't mean that. But what we can say is that we can't assure it yet. And if they want to take this route and be ahead of the ball in terms of anticipation that it may become it may gain an emergency use authorization, then good for them, and that's a great thing to understand, and a great asset for them.
Doc, I'm looking at something from the Korea Times. According to the South Korean Health Ministry, 47 countries have so far asked about importing these South Korean-made COVID-19 test kits, while an additional 39 countries have requested them as humanitarian aid. So I just want to make sure we're not like the last people to the party, and that and not entertaining this idea of the South Korean tests. I know that the governor had said that we're increasing our testing capacity, but are we increasing it to the point where we can just do what Saipan's doing?
Yeah. And so I wanna also be clear about the state of where Saipan is that they received the test kits, but it's not the instrument itself. And so it's like getting a bunch of DVDs but not having a DVD player. And so so they may have gotten these kits, but they're not ready to run for until they get the instrument, they get all the ingredients that they need.
Right, they said in 2 weeks.
Validated.
2 weeks, I think, was what we heard from the NMI.
Yeah, and so a lot can happen in 2 weeks. And in Guam's capabilities of expanding its our FDA EUA emergency use authorization tests are it could be very, very different in 2 weeks, and in fact we're on track for that. Now we talk about these Abbott ID Nows. They're kind of like the most ideal tests because they're so quick. They're low complexity, low to moderate complexity, and it doesn't take too much to validate it and to train the medical technologists to use them in the lab. So that's one of the things that's really important, that we increase the access to test kits for that, because that's going to be the most have the highest utilization. It's probably going to be utilized the most overall. Having 200 tests per week is key, and that's big. Now keep in mind that if you have 20,000 tests, that's great. But if your bottleneck is that you can only run 100 per day, that's going to take you 200 days to run those 20,000 tests. As an example. So we have to keep these things in mind here, and that there's multiple steps here and there's multiple pieces into actually utilizing these tests, and so we have to keep that reality in mind.
I'm just wondering, you said, or CNMI in 2 weeks are going to do this testing, and whatever the multiple is going to be, and we're still running 40 tests a day. I mean, is that the most amount that we can do? And
no, not
and like
anymore.
the AG said, we're a month into this, and we're still seeing 40 tests.
Yeah, and I think, Doc, that we've been hearing that we're going to increase our capacity. We're going to increase our capacity, but we just haven't seen the
increase
the
in
number.
capacity.
Yeah, so
and so what now that we have these tests that are so these instruments, the Abbott ID Nows have been validated. They're in use. They've run their correlation studies with the main tests that have been using the ABI 7500 at Public Health. And so again, the priorities are still with the sicker patients, with the patients that are suspicious for COVID, and recently, as we can see, that in a lot of cases they end up not having COVID, and so they're sick and admitted to the hospital for other reasons. And so it's actually really, really important that we know that, so that we can focus more in on their differential diagnoses that of why they're admitted to the hospital, and focus treatment on that. So there's a key part here in that testing. So we're still utilizing these available tests for hospital patients, and in fact, there's the question of, okay, we have the two Abbott IDs. One is at Public Health Lab, the other's at GMH. There's been conversations internally amongst the physicians advisory group, the governor, and including Linda DeNorsi, and yesterday afternoon, it came to a point of making a decision of where if the Abbott ID Now that's over at Public Health, would it be better served in a laboratory that runs 24/7? And there's only two laboratories on the island that run 24/7, and that's Guam Memorial Hospital's laboratory and Guam Regional Medical City's laboratory. And so those are still the process of and workflow of that is still being worked out, but it makes a lot of sense, and it makes a lot of sense to a lot of the providers, and ultimately we think that that's what's the best for the patients, both COVID and non-COVID patients, to have that rapid turnaround. So we're focusing more on that right now.
Right.
I think that what's going to happen is that, actually not I think, I know what's going to happen is that once we have these other testing modalities, like the Gene Expert, like the BD Max, these are other PCR machines that we're waiting for the kits to be able to really expand the testing. Then we can really change our recommendations to the island and to the island's providers on who to test and how, and then we can start really increasing these our mass testing, and using that. The PCR part is very, very important, because that's another form of confirmatory test. The Abbott ID now is not, it's technically not a PCR test, but it is a cousin of it that is still considered a confirmatory test.
Okay. So we're thinking about moving one of these Abbott machines from public health over to GRMC?
Correct.
Okay. And so what about Linda said that they have a gene expert machine, and they were expecting another one, and that was supposed to go to GRMC.
Well, no, GRMC already has its own gene expert.
Okay.
What we've been waiting on are the test kits themselves.
Okay.
And so public health has their order, GRMC has their order, and so it's a waiting game. It is one of the popular ones throughout the country. And so I think in all likelihood, public health is going to get their order of test kits first.
That's the 4,000.
Yes, the 4,000, I'm not sure how much of that's going to be is going to come at a time. But also to note that public health's gene expert has more testing, has the capacity to test more volume than GRMC does.
So GRMC is going to have a gene expert and a Abbott.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
equipment.
And what we actually wanted to do was try and consolidate the gene experts, and it may make sense for GRMC to put the gene expert at public health. Okay. And that's more of a technical efficiency issue that makes more sense. And if it does, and if it's best for the people and increase the volume, then we're going to do that. And there's nothing, there's really nothing else that matters. If it really makes the most sense for the patients, and we can do it in an efficient way and an accurate way.
Point of personal privilege, Doc. I just wanted to ask here, it's been 3 weeks since you gave your projections. Are we going to get an update on those projections now after 3 weeks? And also, we have 2 minutes, Doc, so if you could tell us where we're at on laying out the hospital expansion plan for the capacity.
Okay, so 2 main points on that. And so the first point is that, we've been, in terms of the projections that we've been doing internally, we've been using that for our working benchmarks. What we're actually in the process of doing is actually consolidating that with FEMA's official projections. So thankfully, they started including the territories into their projections. And the good thing is that we're actually not far off in terms of what our projections are. And so we're consolidating those the points there so that and we had a call with them just yesterday morning, and we were going over some of the points that can help refine their projections, and then we will actually switch over to using theirs as the official one, and what we'll use for planning purposes. So once we get that, and we think we're going to get the next rendition of that by Saturday morning, and so we won't be presenting anything major until after that time. Now, in terms of the build-up, now we have to understand. I heard the parts of Dr. Lumbert's interview, but talking about resources and when should we consult, this is not the time to be talking about pulling back on resources. When we can see, we've been trying to test, just testing by itself. It's been a month, and we were trying to get testing, increased capacity, 1 to 2 weeks before we even had our first positive. So we have to understand that if we let up, our foot off the gas in trying to get our resources here, we're going to be, we're going to be caught off guard here if we try and pull back at any time right now. So, but with that being said, there is a plan for a phased-in potential build-out. So it's not like we're going to add 2,000 beds and boom, let it sit there and wait. No, it's what do we do to first add 50 beds? What do we do to add another 50? And then maybe 100 here. And so it's a phased-out plan that's being refined every single day. And the more we get information about the resources that actually are available, and instead of just ordering it doesn't mean anything in terms of planning. It's about what is the likelihood we're going to get it, and when are we going to get it.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate it. We're going to get you on after 8. We're switching over to KUAM TV 11, but are you going to be at the press conference today?
I probably won't be at that press conference today.
Okay, so I'll touch base with you later, and keep us abreast of when we're going to see the next plan and the next projection.
Okay.
Thanks, Doc.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Thanks,
Wash your hands. Dr. Felix Cabrera, we're going to take a break, and we're going to bring all of this over to KUAM TV